Okay, today I'm delighted to be joined by Professor Colin Herron, CBE, who's Professor of Practice at Newcastle University. Colin has over 45 years experience in the automotive industry, including 17 years at Nissan. And in 2018, he was appointed a CBE for Business and Renewable Energy. So there's a huge amount to discuss about the current state of play of electric vehicles or low carbon vehicles. But I thought I'd like to start at the beginning. When did you first get started on electric vehicles?
Ooh, a long time ago, way before electric vehicles were known in Europe. I used to visit Nissan's technical center in a place called Atsugi. And there was a small thing called a Hyper Mini, which was battery, but we never took much notice of it. And then I think it was 2009, I met a civil servant in a pub in Newcastle, which I'm off to do. And he was talking about Nissan's new electric vehicle, and it had passed me by. I was working for the Regional Development Agency at the time, to which I said, what electric vehicle? And he said, there's one called the Leaf, and they're looking to make it somewhere in Europe. And it was that meeting in the pub that really started a chain of events on this vehicle called the Leaf. So I would say about 2008, 2009. I went out in 2009 and I test drove the Leaf, which was disguised as a Nissan Teda. And we drove it around the test track, and that was it. This new concept. It was, I suppose it was like entering a new world, because nobody ever thought they were coming or knew about them, were being kept secret.
Was it disguised? Is that just normal practice for a new model, or particular reason why they wanted to hide
No,
an electric
it was
product?
disguised. It just looked like a normal Japanese production car.
So how did you progress from then after that test drive in your career?
After a test drive, there was a situation where Nissan were looking for the UK government and French governments and other governments to sign an MOU to investigate where they would put the car plant and the battery plant.
Yeah.
So I ended up spending a lot of time working between my peer group, who were actually executive vice presidents, two of them, Andy Palmer and Colin Dodge in Japan, and the RDA and the Northeast region and the Gordon Brown government, talking about how we could bring all of this to the UK.
Mm-hmm.
It was a strange period of my life where I've told people I went from KLM Ivory to Platinum in 12 months. And my two daughters one day took me to one side and asked me if I was a spy, because I was having clandestine phone calls and disappearing around the world.
So and then how did you end up at the university?
When all of this was going on and there was the announcement that the Leaf was going into Sunderland and the first UK giga plant would be built in Sunderland, there was quite a bit of euphoria. And then the Conservative government took over in the country and closed all the regional development agencies. Mm-hmm. So I found myself basically unemployed because I left Nissan to join the RDA. However, there was a point where the government of this country realised if a big car company was going to build EVs, it would be sensible if there was some infrastructure.
Yeah.
And we in the region made a bit of a point that would be even more embarrassing if the cars came out the factory in Sunderland and there was nowhere to plug them in. Mm-hmm. So Milton Keynes, London and the Northeast got the first contract to put the first regional infrastructures in, which was called Plugged in Places, of which I was the manager and fund holder. We managed to take the key people and that funding, and we created an not-for-profit company within a college to deliver this infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Then, as time went on, we decided that a college was too restrictive for what we were doing. So 3.5 years ago, I moved into Newcastle University.
Mm-hmm. Right. I was just looking at the latest electric vehicle news this morning, and I get completely baffled because we seem to be getting mixed messages. A couple of weeks ago, all the headlines were sales across the world were stalling. Yeah. And then today there are reports that UK sales at least are up 10% over this time last year.
Yeah.
So what's your take on the current state of play?
Oh, it's a pet subject of mine. The sales of EV will inevitably stall. I was giving a lecture to some master's students last week, and I asked them a really, really, really difficult question. For each electric vehicle, how many batteries do they need? The answer's 1. So if you take the total output of the functioning giga plants in Europe at the moment, which is in gigawatt hours, and you divide it by the average battery size, which is about 60 kilowatt hours, that's how many batteries you will get. You can't get any more. That's all you can get. So in the UK, until recently, the total capacity of electric vehicles that could be made in the UK with batteries from the UK was about 35,000. And that figure has gone down over the last 10 years because battery size has got bigger.
Right.
The bigger the battery, the more cells they need, the less batteries you get. In the UK, the current situation is there are no operating battery plants at the moment. So no batteries are being produced. The reason for this is the number 1 battery plant in Sunderland is being refitted after 10 years. The number 2 battery plant won't be operating till the end of this year. The number 3 battery plant is at planning permission stage.
Yeah.
And this is across Europe. So unless there are a huge number of homologated Chinese or some other vehicles coming in, it would always flatten off.
So is battery production, the critical point, the critical path in terms of EV uptake?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's not the number of charge points. The number 1 thing is, until there's high volumes of batteries to allow high volumes of cars, the price will not come down. And it makes sense for car makers at the moment to produce high-spec models because the demand is there. They can also use those high-spec models to recoup some of the billions that have sunk into electric vehicle development.
Right. And, we hear, again, reading from the mainstream press, it's always very difficult because there's a rather strange anti-electric vehicle tendency in some parts of that press. But is it purely the production capability, or is it the supply of lithium and other metals into the process?
That's purely production. Purely.
Right. So more factories equals more EVs.
So Nissan's the biggest car plant in the UK. JLR, I think, technically are the biggest vehicle maker. So the JLR battery plant is just, they're digging the hole in Somerset.
Yeah. And, obviously we're both talking in the northeast of England. We had the rather spectacular rise and fall of British Volt.
Yeah.
Was that a distraction, or was it a hindrance, or what's your take on British Volt?
British Volt was an opportunity lost from the UK and Europe, a bit like Northvolt, to develop our own battery industry. It could have been there. Now, for a person who's had an awful lot of years in the automotive industry, it would have been very challenging for a battery plant to supply premium car makers a battery with effectively no provenance.
Yeah.
Batteries are very critical to the vehicle. So they were going to have a new factory, a new workforce, a new management team, a new chemistry to produce a product which they'd never made before.
Yeah.
That was a massive undertaking, a huge undertaking. So with the fact we developed the UK Battery Innovation Centre for testing and developing batteries, the Faraday Institution for the research, it would have been nice to have the whole capability from research to development to batteries. Was it a distraction to the big car plants in this country? British full feeling? No.
Right. And do you have an insight into battery recycling? Because again, one of the issues that's always thrown up is end-of-life batteries. Are those various what seem like quite early stage projects to recycle the lithium or recycle the batteries? Are they? What's your prognosis on those?
Right. Recycling a battery falls into two things: legislation and economics. Okay. So the EU has published legislation of the minimum amount of recycled material that has to go into a virgin battery. So that will drive behavior. The other side of this is that the chemistry has not been settled in a battery. So what do I mean by this? The lithium ion batteries, which are in, we'll use the Nissan example again, the Leaf, is nickel, cobalt, manganese, and the variance and proportions of the nickel NMC vary. So Nissan started on one chemistry, went to another chemistry, and they're going to move to another chemistry. Tesla are now doing 50% lithium iron phosphate, so it's got none of the cobalt, etc., in them. We're now talking about sodium ion batteries, etc. So one of the challenges we have is when a battery comes out of a car, there's a big black box. What's in it? What's in it determines the value of that battery when it goes for recycling. If it's shredded and it goes to this, what they call black mass, which the way I describe it, it's like the contents of a coffee jar, but black granule powder. That will be sold as a commodity on the market. The value of that black mass will be dependent on what's in, at what ratios. Yeah. So at the moment, if on the world market, cobalt is at a mega high value, and we have batteries where we're recycling and claiming a high cobalt value, it'll have a high value. If it's lithium iron phosphate, the cost of recycling might be more than the value of what comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the recycling industry is going to work on two things. One, have we got valid methods of recycling and extracting the valuable stuff? Do we get enough valuable stuff to hit the regulations of what we've got to do? And two, is this a cost benefit from a scrap battery or a cost penalty? And at the moment, and the other question we've got is, how long does a battery last before it's scrapped?
Yeah.
And we've got almost no batteries at the moment who've gone through their full life and are ready for scrapping.
Right. So that's a big uncertainty, but also
a huge uncertainty.
But also presumably a good sign that they're lasting, given, as you say, models have been available since 2008, 2000.
Yeah. So in our labs here, we've got recycled lithium coming back in to be checked and made into batteries to check if it's as good as the virgin material coming out of a refinery. Yeah,
you mentioned several different chemistries, and you'll soon exceed my knowledge if we go too far down that line. But are there emerging new chemistries that might address some of the issues, whether it's capacity, weight, lifespan, those critical issues?
Okay, the chemistries which are coming out are trying to do two things. Well, more than two things. One is to reduce the cost of the battery, right? So if you can put materials in, which mean things like cobalt and other market variables come out, that's a really good thing. All right. The next thing is, what is the best chemistry for the purpose of that vehicle? I've got a Renault Zoe, and it does hardly, it gets charged once a week, and we've only got one car in the family, and it potters about. I do not need a battery with high performance for energy.
Yeah.
So what we're likely to get is that we will get what we used to call a runaround vehicle or a truck or a bus will probably have something like lithium iron phosphate. Low cost product in it. It will carry on working the way it does. It's perfectly all right. You then move into higher spec. So you'll get what we could call the BMWs, the Audis or whatever, will have lithium NMC because it'll give them the performance that they're paying for. The current holy grail is a thing called solid state batteries, which is actually NMC, but not with, in essence, a liquid electrolyte in the middle.
Yeah.
The reason people want them is they'll say they'll double the range in half the charging time.
Mm-hmm.
But everything comes down to pounds per kilowatt hour. How much does it cost to produce it and sell it? If you're putting that into a Ferrari, the vehicle cost will absorb the cost of the additional. And as with most technologies, solid state will probably go into your Aston Martins, your Ferraris or whatever. Mm-hmm. Then they'll work the way down as it gets cheaper.
Yeah.
The alternative is people want to get rid of lithium, put sodium in because it's more abundant. There's a big campaign to get rid of cobalt because of the Democratic Republic of Congo and things there. We will be having a conference here in September at Newcastle University, which is the National Faraday Conference. And all the researchers working in all these fields will be presenting where we are in this development. Some of them are 10 years away, some of them might be 15 years away. But what we've got now is really between NMC and LFP, but some small cars have got sodium ion batteries in. That's about it where we are. But this is going to evolve constantly.
Right. Now, one of the most surprising things you've said to me was that charging infrastructure is not currently a limitation on the uptake of EVs. If the battery supply gets, in quote, fixed and these other gigaplants, gigafactories come online, will charging infrastructure become a restricting factor, do you think?
There's 35 million cars in the country, mm-hmm. and 20 million cars have got a home, a drive, which they can charge up. Outside of that, people can charge at work, charge at the gym, charge all over the place. Mm-hmm. Then there's the high power chargers, which are being rolled out in massive numbers, which eventually will give you a full tank as we want in 5-10 minutes going forward. One of the challenges is to model how many chargers we actually need by type, by location at a point in time. Mm-hmm. We haven't quite got there yet, but that is what universities and private companies and consultancies are working on. So at the moment, if you want to say, how many chargers by type do we need in this country? Nobody knows.
Right. And do you think that will just emerge organically?
I hope not, because the last lecture I said is it's all based on hope. And my fear is it is still based on hope. The hope that all the councils will put in the right infrastructure and the private sector are also augmented with their networks. And by a touch of pixie dust, we'll have exactly what we need in 2030 for the sales that we'll have.
Yeah. Yeah,
which I have absolutely no confidence that's going to happen.
Because I have a house with no driveway, and one of my neighbours runs cable across the pavement already, which is less than ideal. So I suppose from the layperson's point of view, charging infrastructure is difficult for a lot of people.
No, it's not. I don't have a charge point. I don't have a driveway.
Yeah. And you get by. Well, that's
I don't get by. It's dead easy. I live in Whitley Bay.
Yeah.
Just go down, plug it in, go for a walk, and it's full for a week.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I find very exciting is the idea of all those car batteries once they're produced. being used as energy storage, the vehicle to grid V2G approach. How far off do you think that is?
Oh, it's well underway. And Newcastle is a company called Connected Energy. They've been doing it for years. They take old car batteries, put them in a container, put some clever software in there, and they're being shipped all over the place as energy backup.
I was thinking more, this idea as a car owner, you would become almost an energy broker, that you could.
Oh,
famously,
right. Sorry, when you said energy storage and it's all like batteries, right?
Yeah.
The V2X, V2G, V2H, whatever we want to call it, is progressing a lot. However, this is completely down to economics more than anything else. All right. If you've got Manchester Airport with 20,000 cars there, all plugged in, that's the equivalent of a really big battery.
Yeah.
Right. So Manchester Airport could guarantee people a level of charge, and they can buy and trade the power for that airport through that. So, for instance, the person might pay nothing for their parking for a week, but they allow access to their battery.
Yeah.
At home, if I had a drive, which I don't, I could be in a situation which will happen in the future where a new house will be built with solar panels. It will have two-way charge point, and the algorithms in the house will decide where to take the power from.
Yeah.
So all day Saturday, the sun could shine, could fill the car with power. Then the owner's got the choice. Do I use that power to drive the car? Or at 5 o'clock that night, do I send the power back into the house?
Yeah.
I am not convinced in any way that the national grid wants 35 million people randomly trying to put 20 kilowatts of power back into the grid. And you've got to work out if the feed-in tariff is 10p, I'm not going to bother putting 20 kilowatts hours equivalent back into the grid.
Yeah. I understand that. It's just that obviously with the large-scale renewables being intermittent, there could be a balancing factor, given that most cars spend 96% of their time, I think, is the statistic, doing nothing. That the batteries combined, as you say, like at Manchester Airport, full of car park, full of
something like
battery
that,
storage.
Yes.
Yeah, but you don't think it'll work on an individual basis?
I could see whole estates, if they all went with the same provider, having an aggregated impact.
Yeah.
And I think there is a lot more benefit that I have a choice to run my house off the car at a peak period. But I think the difference is if if the full value of my car is £20 and it lasts me a week, am I really going to sell £3 or £4 back to the grid once a week?
Yeah.
Not if it's going to cost me at the moment 3,000 quid for a hardware interface. It's got to be built into the car, it's got to be built into the system, and it's got to be worthwhile. I once did this using the standard unit of currency I use for everything, which is a pint of beer. Right? And at that point, I think it cost me at home 3 pints to fill the car. If I give the equivalent of a third of that back, it's worth a pint, but I don't get the value of a pint. I get the value of half a pint back.
Yeah.
What would I do that? Why would I do that?
Well, so you cover quite a bit of a round of beer, I suppose, over a few couple of weeks. But yes,
the point is, you see, you take the cost of charge. Even if people are traveling the motorways a lot, they use up the electricity they're buying. My car was charged up on Sunday. It'll get charged up again next Sunday. And it's got about 30 quid's worth, even on a high power charger. On a domestic charger, it's got about £18 worth of fueling, 3 pints worth.
Yeah.
So if I sell half that back, honestly, am I going to do that? And then risk to go and charge again? No, unless it's part of a house system where it's feeding into the house and it's all built into the algorithms of the house.
Yes.
I don't think I'd be bothering.
Yeah. Or if it's a bigger system, as you say, that somebody else is incentivized, so you get free parking, for example, for doing it. The perennial, I suppose, prince across the water in low carbon vehicles is hydrogen, and I must admit, I always sum up my attitude to hydrogen as I wish it could work, but I've been told many times over the last 25 years that it's going to be the next big thing, and it doesn't seem to have broken through. What's your take? Will hydrogen ever be a player?
Hydrogen really does work.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes no economic or logical sense to use it.
So it's not the technical issues, it's the economics.
I think we've now sold over the last 10 years. I don't think we've reached 300 yet in this country. The biggest we sold was about 80 one year. We were down to 8 last year, and there's a few this year. We're now down to 5 functioning hydrogen pumps because nobody uses them.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be around £3 a kilogram. It's now £22 a kilogram.
Mm-hmm.
And people who bought them in California are fuming. And Tesla are now offering a 60% discount to take a hydrogen car. So as far as I'm concerned, the whole question of hydrogen for cars is dead. I believe for vans, it's dead. Whilst there is one bus company in Northern Ireland seriously pushing hydrogen vehicles, 80 or 90% of their bus output is battery. The other big bus company in this country is all battery. No car makers in this country have got any intent of making a hydrogen vehicle. So the question comes, is there something for long, long haul HGVs? That could be a question. But actually building a hydrogen infrastructure for a limited number of hydrogen vehicles is the challenge.
Yeah. So
the way I explain to people with my water bottle, if that's a wind turbine,
yeah,
and the output of that drives my electric car for a year,
mm-hmm.
I need 2.5 of them to drive the equivalent hydrogen car.
Right.
Yeah.
Because of the chemistry of splitting water or however.
And the other thing that nobody ever mentions is that you need 9 litres of water per kilogram of electrolyzed hydrogen, or 45 litres per car, or 300 litres per truck fill. So for every squirt of hydrogen that you believe you need to electrolyze it, you need thousands of litres of pure water.
Well, that's some sort of clarified some of my worries about hydrogen, just as why it never seems to happen. Yeah. Going back to electric vehicles, on the sort of policy side, obviously, last autumn the government watered down their the EV mandate to a certain extent, not quite as abandoned as reported in the press. But what one policy change or multiple policy changes would you make if you could to accelerate the uptake of EVs?
Policy changes are going to make absolutely zero difference to what's happening. Mm. The reason for this is that despite what the Prime Minister said last time, if you take my old car company, they said in 2030, all cars they sell will be electric in 2030. Mm-hmm. The capital that they have to put into doing this was around 3 billion investment in Sunderland and whatever else they're doing in Europe. Car companies, it takes years to develop a platform. Platforms run for about 8 years. So the car companies and the truck makers have decided what they're going to make. They've got to put the billions into wrecking and pulling car plants apart and running this stuff through. Because a prime minister in a country says, I'm not sure, I'm going to change this a little bit, won't make any difference. Because in this country, we don't own any of the car industry at all, it doesn't matter what they say, because they're not going to make cars for the UK only. So my opinion is policy, the only thing policy could do is to make sure we have the right infrastructure in place. The car companies, the truck companies are going to do what they want to do. The policy has been set, which was by this date, trucks and buses, etc. I suppose the only thing they could do would be with buses, and they could delay buses in the UK because we've got double-deck buses. Nobody in Europe's going to make double-deck buses for the UK. I don't think they might have done, but if you see now the number of single-deck buses which are appearing is quite a lot. So
you don't think that announcement by the Prime Minister will make any difference to the
None at all.
Industry in this?
None at all. It's even now it's 80% have to be zero emission instead of 100%. No, I don't think it make any difference at all.
Right. Well, that's certainly bucks a lot of ink that has been written over the last however many months.
I think it might get him a few right-wing votes, but that's about it.
So, we've covered a huge amount of ground, unless there's any topics that you think that are critical that we haven't talked about yet.
Well, number one, EVs are not twice the weight of a conventional car. The equivalent of my car, the Renault Clio, to my Zoe is 17% difference. They're not creating all the potholes on the roads because the potholes are already there before the EVs arrived. There is a problem with fires, but the incidence of fires are less than they are with petrol or diesel. The Luton Airport fire definitely was a diesel. We have to do a lot more work on the availability of, I'll use the word not dodgy, of uncontrolled lithium-ion cells coming on the internet from places which people are making into battery packs and putting in houses. So we are working at Newcastle University with other universities. This is where we need policy. This is where we need control. This is where we need work.
Not least on e-bikes, because I have an e-bike sat quite close over there, e-cargo bike, which I love, proper Bosch branded everything. But you see all these guys writing about delivering junk food with the battery scaffer taped to the frame, and it's not a surprise that there's a problem there.
In my other life, I work at a charity which runs out of an old church, and I found out that in one of the offices they were charging this person's black scooter. I stopped there immediately. Out there, I said to the guy, "It's not even coming on the premises." I don't know where you got it from. I don't know the provenance of it. I haven't got a clue. It's not coming in.
So better regulation of the battery quality.
Completely.
The intervention. So thanks for that, Colin. Just really to sum up then, what message would you like our listeners to take away on electric vehicles?
The message is there is no viable alternative to hit the targets which have been set. The transition is in motion and it's not going to stop. If you still want a petrol car, you can still buy one, but not brand new up until after 2035. You can't buy a petrol or diesel car that's brand new, but you can still drive them as long as you want, so long as you get access to fuel. And I don't know what price that will be. Basically, the transition's underway, the battery plants, the investment's sunk, it's going to happen.
Excellent. On that note, thank you very much for joining us today, Colin.
No problem at all.